Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to the 400 affiliates across the United States and the millions of you who listen, whether live on your radio, whether you listen at hughhewitt.com, maybe you're watching on my YouTube channel, maybe you are simply dipping in and out of the YouTube videos we post over at Facebook. Whatever you're doing, thank you for being part of the Hugh Hewitt Show on this Holy Thursday in the Christian tradition. If you are celebrating the solemnity of the consecration, the communion, remembrance that Christ presided over today, my thoughts and prayers are with you, and I hope tomorrow on Good Friday you'll join us as well. It is a year of suffering already, beyond which, actually, I don't have any experience other than 9/11. Let me give you the rundown, please. The number of coronavirus, according to the Wall Street Journal, infections has passed 432,000 in the United States. Some countries have reported record new number of cases and intensified lockdown measures. The U.S., of course, has more totals than Italy, Spain, and Germany combined because we're doing a lot more testing. That's the answer why. But the national death toll, which is simply not up for debate, is at 14,800. 14,800 people have died from the coronavirus. That is a statement about which debate has occurred because they're saying some people have threads arguing the comorbidities really killed the individual. To which I would respond, if you can't show me that absent the COVID virus, they would still be alive, I'm not buying it. That there is an underlying fragility to the patient doesn't mean they didn't get killed by COVID. That's a legal issue of proximate cause, and COVID is the proximate cause. 14,800. Johns Hopkins cases will continue to rise over the next 3 or 4 days. They're doing all the assembling of the data. And look, we're in for a rough weekend. But here is Anthony Fauci on Fox News yesterday, cut number 4.
By a couple of weeks behind what's fueling the outbreak, namely the number of new cases and the number of hospitalizations. So at the same time as we're seeing an increase in death, like typically what we're seeing now from New York, over the last few days, there's been a stabilization and a decrease in the hospitalizations, admissions to intensive care, and the requirements for intubations. That means that as we get further on beyond this week, we should start to see the beginning of a turnaround, which is a good sign. So, it's very sobering to see the increase in deaths. And we predicted over the weekend that this would really be a bad week. And it is. It's going to be a bad week for deaths. But driving that and ahead of that is the fact that we're going to start to see the beginning of a turnaround. So we need to keep pushing on the mitigation strategies because there's no doubt that that's having a positive impact on the dynamics of the outbreak.
Now, I also want you to understand how good the United States response has been. And this is a tribute to the federal government, to the president, the vice president, the task force, Anthony Fauci, Deborah Birx, and their entire teams, the admiral. It's also a tribute to every governor and every state and local official. It's a tribute to the National Guard. No American has died for want of a ventilator. I want you to understand that. No American has died because there has been a ventilator shortage. There is no shortage of ICU beds. There is no shortage of hydroxychloroquine if the doctor chooses to use it. It is not yet proven. It just seems anecdotally to be very efficacious, but we do not know. Nobody has died in America because of a lack of equipment or personnel. That is a feather in our cap. That is not true around the world. It is true here, and soon we will gear up production to help the world deal with the wave that is coming and will come again in the fall. News story out of the Washington Post this morning. Hundreds of young Americans have now been killed by the coronavirus. And I thought this was an important thing for people to realize. At least 759 people under the age of 50 across the United States have perished amid the deepening pandemic. For the very young, people under the age of 20, death is extremely rare. The Post has identified only 9 cases in the entire country of people under the age of 20. The risk rises with every decade of age. The Post found 45 deaths among people in their 20s, 190 deaths among people in their 30s, 413 deaths among people in their 40s. And this should not surprise. There are outliers in every pandemic, and I could easily compare this to the number of people in those age demographics who are killed by, say, car crashes or the flu. But it just shows that nobody is immune to COVID until you've had it and you've got the antibodies. I also want to report that there's a new study that is not good news from the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine in a recent public report sent to the White House. Don't get your hopes up. After reviewing a variety of research reports, a panel concluded that the studies of varying quality of evidence do not offer a basis to believe that summer weather will interfere with the spread of the coronavirus. My toxicologist retired buddy did tell me that UAV rays from the sun may be useful in removing the virus from surfaces. We shall see. And indeed, the advice I received from a senior administration official is take your COVID-19 compliant mask and spray a little Lysol on it, not too much, then leave it outside in the sun for a day and you can reuse it. But make sure you don't reuse it too soon because you want the Lysol to go away. Time for a market update brought to you by Birch Gold, and it's actually about Birch Gold. What do you do with Birch Gold? If you want to get involved, you text my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 474747. You can also go to hughgold.com to get Birch Gold's free info kit on diversifying into a precious metals IRA that's backed by physical gold or silver. Not all of your IRA, but you might have some that have gone up in value. You might want to diversify right now. From the Financial Times this morning, gold bugs vindicated by coronavirus rally, according to Henry Sanderson. Kevin Kelly, a former Air Force fighter pilot in Scottsdale, has been telling anyone who would listen since 2008 to buy gold and silver in preparation for the next crisis. Gold bugs have been vindicated. Last month, analysts at Goldman Sachs argued it was time to buy as the currency of last resort, saying that gold could hit $1,800 a troy ounce. In fact, as we look at markets this morning, which I will do here as soon as my little cursor can move as fast as possible, we see that gold is up to $1,704. So if you'd listened to me when I first told you about Birch Gold last year, you'd be looking at a 30% increase right now in the value of your money. Don't rush out and throw everything into gold or silver. Just diversify a little bit. Diversify. Overnight, Japan held steady. Hong Kong went up, and England and Europe are rallying a little bit this morning. Global stocks are moving higher as a crucial OPEC meeting looms. So I would encourage everyone to visit Birch Gold via hughgold.com or to send my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 474747 via text. Now, what about the WHO? I don't want the morning rundown to be without Mike Pompeo speaking about the failure of the WHO and our reevaluation of whether or not we're going to fund this most incompetent of agencies, cut number 17.
At this point, we're reevaluating our funding with respect to the World Health Organization. Now, this is very consistent with what President Trump said since the beginning of his campaign. Organizations have to work. They have to deliver the outcomes for which they were intended. And we need to make sure that not only the World Health Organization, but every international organization, that we take taxpayer money and give it to them for the benefit of America. We need to make sure it's delivering on those taxpayer dollars. The World Health Organization is no different in that respect. They have to execute on the mission that they are designed to achieve. And we've seen, with respect to the World Health Organization, here we are. It hasn't accomplished what it was intended to deliver.
On January 14th, the World Health Organization said there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission. This program took up the alarm on January 20th, and we, for 2 weeks, told everyone, yes, there was, because there was evidence in the public prints. The World Health Organization, they say they do good work. It's like having a defensive corner who does 90% of the time is great, but gives up every touchdown pass. The world is in where the situation it is because of the World Health Organization and the People's Republic of China. Never forget it. Donald Trump has done a very good job. Vice President Pence has done a very good job. Do not let Trump derangement syndrome upset your view of reality. This is China's doing, and the WHO is the accomplice. Stay tuned. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Welcome back, America. I am Hugh Hewitt in the ReliefFactor.com studio. The good news, Boris Johnson sat up last night, talked with medical staff. His recovery apparently continues. It's a vicious disease, however. He remains in intensive care. The British government, led by Dominic Raab, the Foreign Secretary, continues to debate when the lockdown should be extended to, not whether or not it will be extended in London. It will be, but for how long, and what does the science tell them? They had another hundreds of deaths overnight in London as well, and that will continue around the globe as the virus makes its first sweep around the world. Good news, antibody testing is progressing. Good news that they have got, as you watched, if you saw the entire press conference last night, an additional number of trials running on hydroxychloroquine and other therapeutics. All of the world's scientific effort is focused on this. There will be silver linings. Indeed, the market appears to be adjusting and anticipating not only breakthroughs, but a return to normalcy faster than we thought. Interesting. Now, I own Amazon. I tell people I own Amazon. Yesterday, a report came out from RBC Capital that the fundamental shift in American consuming habits as a consequence of the lockdown means that Amazon's grocery business is going to grow between $70 and $90 billion as Americans begin to learn how to shop from home. It's just a learned behavior, like a Zoom meeting, like everything else you're doing that's new, teaching from home. You don't go back and you don't forget learned skills. Even if you're an old dog that had to learn new tricks, you began shopping via online, you're not going to forget what you learned during this period of time. It's going to be a different economy, but a very vibrant one when it comes back. Analysts are beginning to realize that the trillions of dollars in recovery, it's not a stimulus, it's recovery money. I want to thank Pacific Mercantile Bank. PMB is a California bank, been around for quarter century. And PMB has been the bank of the Nixon Foundation for a long time. They processed our small business loan. It's done. Money will arrive next week. That means I don't have to lay anybody off for 2 months. That's terrific. I'm the CEO of the Nixon Foundation. The museum is closed. All of our events, business is closed. I feel really bad for the brides, the proms, the business meetings that were going to come to the most beautiful meeting facility in the United States. It's the East Room West. It's a complete recreation of the East Room. And just redone, refurbished, thanks to Charlie Zhang and Ling, his wife. It's a wonderful, wonderful place. It's empty. It's quiet except for a blood drive. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt did the blood drive yesterday, and we are all happy that she could. We're all happy that the blood drive goes forward all across the United States. You need to participate in it if you can get there. They're all socially distanced. They're very safe. I want you to understand that we've got an amazing loan system in place across the United States. It needs to be replenished. Leader McConnell will go to the floor today and ask for an additional $250 billion to go into that, which stops layoffs before they happen at small businesses. I cannot believe anyone would object to that. It's working. It took our little bank, Pacific Mercantile Bank is not little, but it's only in California. They figured it out. Community banks across the United States are figuring it out. Big banks have figured it out. It took a week, but it's happening. And so get in and get your application. Inquire. They're just going to run out of money. Because there wasn't enough appropriated, and they need to refill that coffer and keep refilling it so that small businesses make it through this period of 6 to 8 weeks. That's all that really needs to happen. What do you need to do? You need to stay home, continue to social distance. I'm a little frustrated with the White House press corps. They do not ask the comorbidity questions. I think Dr. Birx said last night it requires 3 comorbidities for COVID to be fatal. And I said, what, 3? And there's demographic information about age and race and gender and the most fatal of the comorbidities. Is it diabetes? Is it obesity? Is it asthma? Is it rheumatoid arthritis? What is it? I did an interview yesterday with the Global Healthy Living Foundation, GHLT.org, which I'll post at my Facebook page, globalhealthylivingfoundation.org, where they have support groups for all of the underlying comorbidities and how they react with COVID. I'd really encourage you to go and join the globalhealthylivingfoundation.org. It's free. Go there and join that support group and find out. But I really would like the White House reporters to start asking some serious science questions because inquiring minds want to know. Stay tuned. It's The Hugh Hewitt Show. Liz Cheney is next.
Portions of The Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Job Creators Network.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thanks for listening. Joined now by Representative Liz Cheney of Wyoming. She is the chairman of the House Republican Conference, the third-ranking member of the GOP in the House of Representatives. Good morning, Congresswoman Cheney. Great to have you back.
Hi, Hugh. Great to be with you as always.
I want to ask about your mom and dad. I saw your dad for lunch a couple of months ago. He looked better than I'd seen him look in 20 years. How's he doing? How is your mom doing?
They're both doing well. They're being obviously extremely careful. You know, my dad's got a compromised immune of his transplant, so he's one of the people that are particularly susceptible. Have to be very careful right now. So they're being very responsible and careful, and we're doing a lot of FaceTime dinners with them and things like that. But they're both doing well, and my mom actually is working on another book, which should be out later on this year.
It's on the Virginians, right? The Virginia presidents?
Yeah, it's really a wonderful topic. Looking at the first 5 presidents who were born within about a 10-mile radius or so of each other in Virginia, and just that miraculous period of our founding. It's a wonderful book. I've had the opportunity to read the first couple chapters of it, and really excited and proud of her.
Looking forward to it. I thought her book on Madison, ought to have won the National Book Award. It did groundbreaking work. I'm looking forward to the same thing. I don't know much about Monroe, but I wonder if they have the same frustration I do, Congresswoman, which is I can't see my grandkids because they're little balls of kryptonite for people who are over 60. Drives me crazy.
Exactly. That is a conversation, but we've gone a long way in terms of learning how to use family FaceTime, teaching them.
Great. I'll bet you that's a treat because he never touched a computer. All right, let me talk about serious stuff. I am very disappointed in Speaker Pelosi. I can't even begin to tell you how disappointed I am in Speaker Pelosi. What is your assessment? It's so partisan when we should not be partisan, but yet I mean, she comes out of the Baltimore machine. San Francisco's a machine. She just can't shed her partisan approach.
I mean, Hugh, just think about how sad it is for the country that she is running the House of Representatives right now. I mean, we have got small businesses all over this country in the middle of this economic and public health crisis that are depending on these loans that we've been able to get out the door for their very survival. They need these loans. They're a life raft. We are in a position where the money has been oversubscribed. We've got to appropriate more. The White House would like more. The Republicans in the House would like more. The Senate needs more. We could do it quickly. We could do it this week. And she's standing in the way, and she's delaying once again. I think it is, really shameful given the fact that we are in the middle of a crisis. And she's been really public over the course of this crisis in terms of saying that she plans to use it to get agenda items that they believe in passed because the legislation is must pass. We've got to come together as a nation and put aside party differences. There are many members of the House and Senate on both sides who are doing that, but the Speaker of the House is not one of them.
I have not yet played one time the video of her visiting Chinatown in San Francisco when we knew that asymptomatic transmission was possible, because I thought there is no purpose in looking back and scoring points. There just isn't. And this radio show was on this from January 20th, 40 forward. I got nothing to worry about if we look backwards, but I just don't see any point in it. I do see a point in replenishing this fund. I told the listeners before you joined, Congresswoman Cheney, the Nixon Foundation, which I helm, has got 36 plus employees, and I had to make a choice. And luckily, the small business loan covers us. We don't have any admission revenue. We don't have any events revenue. I was going to have to lay off people. I don't have to lay off people because Pacific Mercantile Bank got our application and there's money left. But that will not be the case unless the Congress replenishes the funds for thousands of other businesses.
Yeah, we are in an absolutely unprecedented economic crisis, and it is unprecedented because we're obviously facing the crisis of the coronavirus because we've had to basically shut the economy down. We want these small businesses to be able to operate when we come out of this. We need them to be able to operate. They're the backbone of the economy. The only way to do that is if we provide relief right now. And the Speaker of the House, I don't frankly know how she can live with herself, knowing that she is holding this up when it is just desperately needed funding for the American people. And she did it the last go-around, too, when we were talking about funding for healthcare, funding for the kinds of research and mass commercial production we're going to need to be able to do when we get to the point where we've got therapeutics that we know are working. I don't understand it, and I don't understand why her party continues to select her as their leader in the House.
Well, we know what Rahm Emanuel said famously, never let a crisis go to waste, and they seem intent on not allowing this to go to waste. But I do not believe Leader McConnell will allow anything through the Senate that smacks of opportunism, anything. There are three things I'd like to talk about with you. First of all, in the first round, $2.2 trillion. It was phase 3, but it was the first major funding bill. There was not much money for defense, no money for anything pointed towards China, reallocation of assets, no new ships. We didn't forward fund the Columbia class, which could do in a lump sum transfer to whoever builds it. Constitutional, it's appropriate. Will you allow that to happen again? No money for defense in a $2.2 trillion bill that is in response to a Communist Party of China's indifference to the world?
Look, I think you're absolutely right, Hugh. We've got to make sure that we include resources for defense. I think that we have to take a look at China from an entirely new perspective. Frankly, I think that there are many of us who've been focused on the threat from China for a number of years. I think what we've seen now with respect to this crisis is, people who have been ignoring it or looking the other way have really got to face facts. And it is a threat that we face that is all encompassing. I mean, if you look at what you're mentioning in terms of what the Chinese have been able to do from a military perspective, the extent to which we cannot let them have an advantage. We've got to make sure that we overcome them in a whole range of areas. Look at what they've been able to do with respect to supply chain. And that is in and of itself a national security threat. The extent to which they now produce so many of the pharmaceuticals that we need, produce so many of the components that go into pharmaceuticals that are produced in other countries, and the real national security threat that poses. When you combine the fact that the Chinese control the supply chain for critical pharmaceuticals we need, with the extent to which we know that they have been able to steal so much of our vital information, when you think about what they're able to do in terms of the kind of cyber war that they've launched on us, think about the combination of the Chinese knowing key information about key officials, for example, and the extent to which they are able to produce pharmaceuticals and may have access to health records. I mean, it is a nightmare scenario in a whole range of ways, including the fact that the United States has almost no capability anymore to produce simple generic antibiotics, which are absolutely crucial life-saving medicines. We cannot allow this to go on, and it's going to be very important that we ensure that we find ways that we basically say, all right, that's it, no more supply chain. We've got to move that supply chain out of China, while we also are combating them from a military perspective around the world and frankly in space as well.
Your colleague Congressman Gallagher and Senator Cotton have introduced the pharmaceutical stand-up bill in the United States. I'm all for that. And the Speaker wants to help state and local governments. I wouldn't object if that money was targeted towards hardening cyber systems of the state and local governments and increasing their ability at the state attorney general's level to surveil for PRC, nefarious activities. So there's some things you can do for the state and local governments. I just don't want to spend it on pension funds that are paying people obscene amounts of money. Let me ask you about retirement funds, Congresswoman Cheney. The leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, assured that Americans didn't have to make a mandatory withdrawal this year, which is good because their assets have deflated. He waived the 10% penalty. The Senate did, and the House agreed on withdrawals because some people have to go get that money. But to that end, I think if people have to go get money out of their retirement, they ought to be flat taxed at 10%. We've got, I think, $12 to $14 trillion in retirement account asset protected, that if we allowed to come out at a 10% flat tax would be the greatest burst of liquidity ever. And there are many entrepreneurs who will lose everything if they don't use their retirement. So they're going to use it one way or the other. Have you folks talked about not penalizing people for using their retirement to save their lives?
We have, and I think it's a really important set of issues. We don't want people, as you say, to face a situation where they're going to lose everything, where they're, we provided some relief in terms of the required withdrawals, but I think that as we go forward and we look at future packages, we've got to make sure that this is an issue. We're looking for additional ways, whether it's the flat tax you mentioned, Hugh, or others. On the issue of retirement, though, I think there's another national security piece of this as well, which is the thrift savings plan. The United States Thrift Savings Plan, which is the retirement funds of our, federal workers across the government, And we're facing the fact right now that significant portions of that are invested in Chinese companies. Even some Chinese companies that have connections to the Chinese military-industrial complex. The extent to which that's another area that we have to absolutely take a look at. There's no justification that I can see for saying that you're going to have U.S. government employee funds, including some of the members of our military, going to fund Chinese companies, some of which are the very Chinese companies that are producing weapons, helping to supply weapons that could be used against us if we ever were to get into a conflict. So there's a huge amount of disentangling that's got to go on, and I think a really hard look at the extent to which we have made ourselves vulnerable because the Chinese have been able to infiltrate so many aspects of our system.
Let me close by waking up to this. And the PRC, look, I run the Nixon Foundation. I was very happy that we have the opening to China. There are many Chinese Americans who are very, very distraught that the Communist Party of that country has driven their country into the hole that it's in now. And they're doing everything they can PR-wise. But it seems to me that this country needs to be as serious about the CCP as it once was about the CCP of the USSR. And I'm hoping that President Xi is facing his Khrushchev moment, 1964, when his Politburo, Khrushchev, just said, that's enough, you've screwed up. President Xi deserves actually to be exited from the world stage. What do you think we can do to alert America? Because it's much more difficult for us to reorient ourselves after 50 years of backslapping towards cold reality vis-a-vis the CCP, Liz Cheney.
I think that the coronavirus itself has got to be that wake-up call. I think that, when you look at what we're facing today here in the United States and around the world, you could end up with millions dead around the world. Certainly the global economy is ground to a halt because of this virus that came out of China, whether it came out of the wet market, whether it came out of the biological lab. It came out of China. It came out of practices that the Chinese Communist Party has been aware for decades contain the kind of harm in them, the wet markets, the transmission potential from animal to human. They allowed this to happen, and then they covered it up, and they clearly cost additional lives because they were not willing to come forth with the information. They are continuing to cover up valuable information, and that cannot be allowed to go on. When a country operates like that, the rest of the world needs to say, you don't get to continue to be a member of the community of nations when you've unleashed something like that on the world, when you could have stopped it, unless you clean up your act, unless you stop it. I think that you're right with respect to President Xi. I think that we need to have a very clear-eyed look at the Chinese Communist Party and the death and destruction that they've unleashed on the world, and that behavior has got to stop if they want to rejoin the community of nations.
Last question, Liz Cheney. When China was allowed to join the World Trade Organization, I believe it was under President Clinton, I'm not sure, it was said that the WTO would change China. In fact, China changed the WTO. It is now clear that the WHO has been compromised by the PRC in a way that Mr. Tedros should simply step down. He should quit. The Secretary of State was being a diplomat when he did not call for that yesterday. But what is your opinion on the WHO and whether or not we have international organization capture by the PRC, CCP there?
We have international organization captured globally by the CCP. With respect to the WHO, the fact that the head of the WHO was unwilling to say, for example, yes, it's right to cut off travel from China, was unwilling to acknowledge that there was, community transmission, has been touting the Chinese Communist Party line from the beginning of this, tells you that he absolutely should go. And again, we're in a situation where having somebody who is a puppet of the Chinese Communist Party running the WHO is costing lives around the world. And in order for that organization to play anywhere near the role we need it to play, it needs a new director, certainly.
Congresswoman Liz Cheney, thank you for joining me. My best to your entire family. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay in the leadership.
Thanks so much, Hugh. I appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you. Yep. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined now from Israel by Dr. Michael Oren. I hope you had a happy Passover, Dr. Oren, last night.
Happy, scale down, I got to say. A lot of Zoom correspondence back and forth, a lot of singing. A great day for you. You know, I live in a U-shaped apartment complex. And last night, as people sat down, most of them without their families, to have the Passover Seder, there's some great songs at the end of the Seder that everyone sings. Everyone waits to sing the songs. Everyone came out in their balconies and sang that song. And it was so deeply stirring.
Wow. I hope someone filmed that. You should post that,
I
Dr.
did.
Oren. You know, good. Oh, good. I will go find it.
It did.
Now,
great. It was so with that.
with that, let's return to the chosen people's favorite pastime when they're not defending themselves, which is politics. What's going on?
Well, you know, I've been telling you for weeks that we're going to form a national unity government, and then they
Yes.
finally began the talks to form a national government, and now it's stalled again. There's a scuttlebutt out here that's saying that Benjamin Netanyahu, now that he's broken up the opposition blue and white, now that he's humbled the head of that opposition, Benny Gantz, actually wants to go to a fourth round of elections because he's polling at 10 seats more than he did in the previous elections, and there's really no opposition against him. Now, I think that would be, you know, given the situation we're in right now, I don't think that would be the most prudent course, and I think many Israelis may resent it. But if you're a cold, calculating politician, that could be the way you go.
It's a great threat, and that threat can be used to get, I assume, a concession or two more from Benny Gantz.
He doesn't have a strong hand going into negotiations. What he wants is to control the justice ministry, because as in the United States, you know, those who control the nominations to the Supreme Court and the legal process, that's a huge, huge tool in politics. Benny Gantz wants to get those ministries for people in his party, and Netanyahu originally said yes, and then there was a big backlash from the Likud, and now he's saying no. But that no could also serve him for a longer range political strategy, which has him going toward a fourth election.
Now, Naftali is your current defense minister. He is one of the critics of the alleged deal that is in outline. What will he settle for, Dr. Oren?
I don't know. He's saying he won't settle for anything. But I think the major issue, you know, sometimes my mother was a therapist, a family therapist, who was fond of saying the presenting problem is not the problem. The presenting problem for Naftali Bennett is whether or not he's defense minister. But the real problem, I think, is the Trump peace plan, which calls for a Palestinian state, albeit in a much reduced, constricted way. It's not a full sovereign state. It's very small. But Naftali Bennett sits at the head of a party which is opposed in principle to any Palestinian state. If it's the size of my apartment complex, he's not going to support it. I think that's the main problem. And that's why I've said on this program several times that though the presenting problem may be the Justice Ministry, it may even be annexation in the Trump peace plan. Ultimately, it's the peace plan itself and the vision it has for Israel's relationship with the Palestinians in the Arab world.
I am curious about this because I always thought that annexation plus the Trump peace plan would yield some stability, whether or not the voices on the West Bank are united in opposition to whatever. It just seems to me that Judea and Samaria are going to come in large part back into Israel and that people are going to live with that. Is that not the reality on the ground?
It is the reality of the ground, and it's a very fine line to be drawn here. On one hand, it's crucial, I think, I don't want to speak for the White House, but I believe from the White House perspective, it's crucial to get the Saudis and the Gulf Arabs on board to back this peace plan, make it a real peace plan. They also need the $50 billion to invest in the Palestinian economy. That's an important part of the peace plan. I don't know for certain whether the Saudis and the Gulf Arabs will go along with the peace plan if Israel annexes a huge chunk of Judea and Samaria up front. It has to be coordinated. On the other hand, this is a big other hand, if the Arabs sit on the sidelines and do nothing, and Israel doesn't annex, then there's no way to prove to the Arab world that the president is serious about this peace plan. So the annexation then becomes a way of proving that people are serious here. And if you don't play along, you're going to pay a price. It's always been one of the tenets of Trump's diplomacy is to say, in contrast to the past, where if you got a peace plan and you rejected it, hoping to get a better peace plan the third or second time around, no. In the Trump world of diplomacy, the first plan is the best plan. The second and third plan are worse and worse still.
That's excellent. Now, I want to close completely off topic because I'm sequestered like everybody else. I'm alternating between Le Bureau, which is an Amazon Prime story about the DGSE, and Fauda, which I think is about Shin Bet. What do you think of Fauda?
Oh, I love Fauda, and I know the people who do it well. I know the director and the person who conceived of it. Avi Sakharov is wonderful. Lior Raz is a fantastic actor. By the way, if you go on YouTube, there's a great Corona spoof with English subtitles on Fauda.
On Fauda. Now, is Fauda Shin Bet? Is that what it's supposed to be?
Yes, it's supposed to be the Shin Bet.
And so, do they like it? Because the DGSE likes Le Bureau. I don't know if you've watched that, but I always look to the agency that's being portrayed for whether or not it's well done.
I don't know. Sometimes even when these series can be critical, they tend to the recruitment levels go through the roof, and it's very interesting how that works. And
Michael Oren, good to talk to you.
On. Really, thank you for staying on. Be well.
We will talk to you soon. Be well. Take care, America. I'll be right back. Hour number 2 of the Hugh Hewitt Show comes on next.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Safe Spaces.
Morning, Glory America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to my 400 affiliates across the globe, most of them, of course, in North America. Good to have you with me. I'm Hugh Hewitt in the ReliefFactor.com studio asking when Congress next moves to appropriate a lot of money. And it will probably be Phase 5. Phase 4 is going to be the funding of the small business loan program, which is short of money. Then Phase 5 will be the second big tranche of dollars. They've got to give some money to defense. They've got to give a lot of money to defense. I'm joined by Lieutenant General David Deptula. He is the Dean of the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies. You can follow him on Twitter at Deptula_David. Good morning, General. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Hugh. Very good. How about yourself?
Good. My question is very simple. I raised it with Congresswoman Liz Cheney earlier. We can't not respond to the PRC via some appropriation, some forward funding. What do you think in the next bill they ought to forward appropriate, which is perfectly constitutional? You just transfer a bunch of money to a private contractor that's building a particular weapon system and say, go forth and build. We'll monitor it from the IG's office. What do you think ought to get built first?
Well, Hugh, I think it's extraordinarily important to increase the procurement of those systems that have direct relevancy to meeting the needs of our national security strategy. And that means that we need to up our game in defense relative to dealing with an ever increasingly aggressive China, as well as a potentially volatile Russia. So specifically, one of the things that has given us an advantage over the years has been our ability to deliver a heavy blow, regardless whether an adversary's defenses consist of. When it comes to long-range power projection, that means air power. And when it comes to modern air power that's capable of penetrating the defenses of China, that means we need to increase our buy of F-35s as rapidly as possible. We should have had over 1,000 by now, but we're lagging because of limits that were put on America's military budget by the Budget Control Act of 2011. So it's very possible to double the current annual production of F-35s from 48 a year to 100 per year, as that would only cost about $4.5 billion. Putting that into comparison with the most recent relief bill of over $2.2 trillion, that amounts about 1/500th of that bill. And it would put the Chinese on notice that in this crisis, we've not neglected defense.
So F-35s is at the top of your shopping list. The reason I ask this is if I'm on the Politburo of the People's Republic of China, or I'm General Secretary Xi, and I see the Americans just spent $2.2 trillion and they didn't put anything into defense. I mean, literally nothing except hospital expansion, some base construction, things like that, which is useful, but it is not a defensive system. It doesn't have striking capability. I would laugh. I mean, I would just simply say these Americans do not know the world in which they live. Would you not do the same?
Yeah, no, you're right, Hugh. The other thing we need to pay attention to is we've got to have a total reconsideration of China's role in the world, and the economic relationship with China is one that also figures directly into defense. When you look at the chokehold they have on pharmaceuticals, what they're doing with 5G and agriculture policy, we got to bring drug manufacturing back to the United States as a top priority. Another must-win is blocking Huawei from world domination of 5G. And these are economic issues, but they're also related to defense. But you're right. We need to increase, or at least get us back to what's necessary to meet the demands of what's already in our defense strategy. This is what's really frustrating sometimes to some of us who have spent decades in the military, in that Congress sometimes, they just parcel out money on the basis of, well, that's about enough. Well, how about tying expenditures to what your national security strategy actually says? So,
is there capacity, General, to double F-35 output?
Yes, Absolutely. And we're not talking about, buying all the remaining 1,500 plus airplanes in 1 year. We're talking about doubling production from 48 a year to 100 a year. That's for the Air Force variant. And then you could do likewise a similar increase in the Marine and the Navy variants as well.
Now, that just seems to me so obvious, but so does the Columbia-class submarine, so does the B-21. And I am not afraid of forward appropriation because it's constitutional. A lot of people say you can't forward fund, but you can lump sum fund into the private sector. And the question becomes, General, would you trust a private sector company with that kind of money if it was forward funded for a multi-year acquisition strategy in 1 year, because of the signal would overcome the noise for the market and for the adversary out there if we did that?
Hugh, it's one of the smartest things we can do. The short answer to your question is yes, because you can always intervene if there's some sort of mismanagement or misuse of the money. But we have to get away from this year-to-year budgeting process. It's anachronistic, it's inefficient, and it's expensive. Not to mention the fact that every year we revisit issues that we know we're going to have long-term commitments to. It is adherence to an anachronistic, old method of dealing with congressional authorizations and appropriations. We've got to move to a system that's much more multi-year based, as you suggest.
Let me close by asking you, General Deptula, I don't know what your background is in this, although given the variety of jobs you held, it's got to be significant. We have allowed the nuclear enrichment cycle to get out of our hands. That is mining, processing, enrichment. We need that for our ships. We need that for our weaponry, and we don't have it. And right now we are reliant upon enriched uranium for Russia, which we'll have to continue to do for a few years until we get enrichment back. But we've got to mine it in America, process it in America, enrich it in America. Do you have an opinion on whether that is the equal of the pharmaceutical issue in terms of repatriating production, enrichment, and processing capacity?
It's an excellent question, Hugh. I need to do a little digging to answer your question in terms of if it's on the same level as trying to get our pharmaceuticals back into the country, but it's certainly one that does deserve attention, as does the situation regarding rare earth minerals.
Yes.
Are consolidated, if you will, to a large degree inside of China.
I don't know where we get rare earth minerals other than China, do you?
Yeah, no, again, it has to be one that is, that whole issue needs to be addressed in the context of any sort of an agreement, trade agreements that we have and economic agreements with China. But back to your issue on consolidating and reinvigorating the uranium and having controls over what we need to process our nuclear weapons capabilities, that's certainly one that top-level attention needs to be paid to.
General David Deptula, I hope someone is, I know they're listening. Doubling the F-35 acquisition for the Air Force and the Navy and the Marine Corps is one thing we ought to do in the next package that is immediate and necessary, and I think they ought to forward fund. Thank you, General. Follow him at Deptula_David. Follow me if you're a small businessman, please, to Job Creators Network, jobcreatorsnetwork.com. Join it now. Share your stories. They are shaping up Phase 4, Phase 5, Phase 6 as we reopen the American economy. We cannot let small businesses get left behind. Right now, Speaker Pelosi is blocking. Chuck Schumer is blocking. Joe Biden is blocking relief for small businesses. They are refusing until they get their Christmas tree list of left-wing wishes to refund America's small business. There isn't enough money in the CARES Act original loan for all the small businesses that need that 2-month bridge loan and GAP grant, and they are blocking it. JobCreatorsNetwork.com will work to end that. While you're stuck at home, NoSafeSpaces.com, NoSafeSpaces.com, NoSafeSpaces.com. That is the movie by Dennis Prager and Adam Carolla. They have a 25% off coupon. I think it's sale 25. Sale 25. Now, I've heard other people give different coupons, but I think it's sale 25. You get 25% off. 99% rating at RottenTomatoes.com. Go and get it. Come back. I'll bring you up to speed on what Liz Cheney told me during the break. I'll play for you because that's what we do here on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Don't forget to sign up for the Hughiverse. All of Hugh's broadcasts on demand, the after show, which in my opinion is worth the price all by itself, Dwayne FM, and all sorts of bonus content. www.hughiverse.com.
Foundation. I was very happy that we have the opening to in now at the CCP
military industrial complex, connections to the Chinese, connections to the military industrial markets, the transmission potential from animal to human. They allowed this to happen, and then they covered it up, and they clearly cost additional lives because they were not willing to come forth with the information. They are continuing to cover up valuable information, and that cannot be. Millions dead around the world. Certainly the global economy is ground to a halt because of this virus that came out of China. Whether it came out of the wet market, whether it came out of the biological lab, it came out of China. It came out of practices that the Chinese Communist Party has been aware for decades contain the kind of harm in them, the wet markets, the transmission potential from animal to human. They
And I'm hoping that President Xi is facing his Khrushchev moment, 1964, when his Politburo, Khrushchev, just said, that's enough, you've screwed up. President Xi deserves actually to be exited from the world stage. What do you think we can do to alert America? Because it's much more difficult for us to reorient ourselves after 50 years of backslapping towards cold reality vis-a-vis the CCP, Liz Cheney.
I think that the coronavirus itself has got to be that wake-up call. I think that, when you look at what we're facing today here in the United States and around the world, you could end up with millions dead around the world. Certainly the global economy is
happy that we have the opening to China. There are many Chinese Americans who are very, very distraught that the Communist Party of that country has driven their country into the hole that it's in now. And they're doing everything they can PR-wise. But it seems to me that this country needs to be as serious about the CCP as it once was about the CCP of the USSR. And I'm hoping that President Xi, is facing his Khrushchev moment, 1964, when his Politburo, Khrushchev, just said, that's enough, you've screwed up. President Xi deserves for us to
itself has got to be that wake-up call. I think that, when
Liz Cheney.
I think that today here in the end up with millions dead around the world. Certainly the global economy is ground to a halt because of this. It up, and they clearly cost additional lives because they were not willing to come forth with the information. They are continuing harm in them, the wet markets, the transmission potential from animal to human. They allowed this to happen, and then they covered it up, and they clearly cost additional lives because they were not willing to come forth with the information. They are continuing to cover up valuable information, and that cannot be allowed. The country operates like that. They allowed this to happen, and then they covered it up, and they clearly cost additional lives because contain the kind of harm in them, the wet markets, the transmission potential from animal to human. They allowed this to happen and covered it up.
Welcome back, America. I am Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening. Follow me on Twitter at Hugh Hewitt. Nice yesterday that Ivanka Trump retweeted one of my tweets. I like that. That added a few thousand people. I'd love to get to 200,000 followers. They're the right 200,000 people. Pretty much everyone in the news business, with a few exceptions, follows me. The people who don't want to be informed, and I can't do anything about that because the news media is badly broken. It's going to take decades to repair. More on that later. I want you to hear the end of my interview with Liz Cheney from last hour. Here it is.
You don't get to continue to be a member of a community of nations when you've unleashed something like that on the world, when you could have stopped it, unless you clean up your act, unless you stop it. I think that you're right with respect to President Xi. I think that we need to have a very clear-eyed look at the Chinese Communist Party and the death and destruction that they've unleashed on the world. And that behavior has got to stop if they want to rejoin the community of nations.
Last question, Liz Cheney. When China was allowed to join the World Trade Organization, I believe it was under President Clinton, I'm not sure, it was said that the WTO would change China. In fact, China changed the WTO. It is now clear that the WHO has been compromised by the PRC in a way that Mr. Tedros should simply step down. He should quit. The Secretary of State was being a diplomat when he did not call for that yesterday. But what is your opinion on the WHO and whether or not we have international organization capture by the PRC, CCP there?
We have international organization captured globally by the CCP. With respect to the WHO, the fact that the head of the WHO was unwilling to say, for example, yes, it's right to cut off travel from China, was unwilling to acknowledge that there was community transmission, has been touting the Chinese Communist Party line from the beginning of this, tells you that he absolutely should go. And again, we're in a situation where having somebody who is a puppet of the Chinese Communist Party running the WHO is costing lives around the world. And in order for that organization to play anywhere near the role we need it to play, it needs a new director, certainly.
Congresswoman Liz Cheney, thank you for joining me. My best to your entire family. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay in the leadership.
Thanks so much, Hugh. I appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you. Now, we will post the entire conversation at my YouTube channel, to which you should be a subscriber. Go to youtube.com, type in Hugh space Hewitt, and you will be there. Just hit subscribe. You'll get all the crucial interviews that we do here. You can also watch the show live there. You can watch it at hughhewitt.com. Follow me on Twitter and follow me now to the pre-market and overnight report brought to you by andrewandtodd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian, longtime friends of mine. They're longtime sponsors of the show. Andrew and I were in a Bible study for 20 years when I lived on the West Coast. I've known Todd Avakian for 7 years. They are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They lend you money, 888-1172, and a lot of people need money right now. They need to tap the equity of their home. They need to get a reverse mortgage on a home they've paid off. They're a veteran and they want to buy a home at what is a pretty good time to buy a home because they have 0% down requirements. That's all done by andrewandtodd.com. The best thing to do is to go to their website and answer a couple of questions, andrewandtodd.com, or you can call them 888-1172. But I prefer andrewandtodd.com. They have a great crackerjack team. Overnight, Japan stayed the same, didn't go up or down. Hong Kong went up 1.33%. As open market right now, England and Germany are rallying. I expect the rally to continue in the United States, but I'm not a prophet nor the son of a prophet. Yesterday, the Dow went up 779, the NASDAQ 203. Take advantage of these interest rates, andrewandtodd.com. And don't forget relieffactor.com. I'm telling you about it early just to shake it up a little bit, relieffactor.com. Get there, get the 4 natural supplements that make it easier for you to get out there and run, walk, do new exercises, do Pilates from home, whatever it is. Support for the temporary relief of minor aches and pains comes from relieffactor.com. Tens of thousands of people use it every day. I take it in the first hour. I tell you about it in the second and the third hour. And I want to remind you as well about honorboundcoffee.com. Pete and Seth Talbot started that like they started relieffactor.com. Honorbound Coffee, though, 100% of the profits go to support military families because Pete and Seth are wonderful, and they know the wonderful people who are sacrificing as we speak. So every cup of coffee that you drink ought to be at honorboundcoffee.com. 4 different brews, 4 different blends, 4 different filters. Well, you got lots of choices. Go look at honorboundcoffee.com. Subscribe to it. You'll never have to shop for it again in the supermarket, and every cup of coffee you drink will support America's troops. That's why I support Honorbound Coffee. That's why I also think you can trust relieffactor.com.
And for thank you again for joining us this afternoon. We thank you again for joining us this afternoon. We'd like to close now with a song
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Joining me now from West Africa is the Washington Post bureau chief, Danielle Paquette. I believe she is in Senegal this morning. Good morning, Danielle. Welcome to the program. Thank you for joining me. Where do we find you this morning?
Good morning, Hugh. I'm actually in Washington for the moment, but should be back in Dakar, Senegal soon.
Okay, now, would you explain to people, I'm so grateful to the Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the BBC for maintaining foreign bureaus so that we have some idea what's going on around the world. But how often do you go there? How often do you get home? And how long have you been a foreign correspondent?
I've been a foreign correspondent for about a year. Normally, I live in Dakar, traveling the region somewhere new every 2 weeks or so. Recently landed in D.C. with my family as the pandemic grows, but I hope to be back in Dakar once that airport opens in a couple weeks or so. That is the timeline.
All right, now for the benefit of the Steelers fans, Senegal is bordered by Mauritania, Mali, Guinea-Bissau. It's the part of Africa that's closest to South America. That's what we'll tell the Steelers fans. What's it like to live there?
I love it. You know, Dakar is a seaside capital. You can see the ocean from your roof. You can eat a fish someone just caught on the beach. So really, it's a peaceful place that exists pretty close to large conflict zones. We have in Nigeria, as you know, the Boko Haram insurgency, along with issues with Islamic State offshoots. We also have the world's fastest growing Islamist insurgency in Mali, Burkina Faso, the Niger border. So while I'm covering those conflicts, I really appreciate coming back home to Dakar and sort of unwinding.
So Danielle, tell us, Danielle Paquette is my guest, tell us, what is the virus doing in West Africa?
You know, the virus is disrupting life just like everywhere else. But in West Africa, the response quickly has been close your border. Several countries have shut down their airports. The big deal right now is preventing the spread because these are particularly vulnerable populations. The healthcare systems are drastically underfunded in many cases. So right now they're hunkering down. There's several kind of lockdowns in order across the region, and doctors, healthcare officials, they're right now just addressing preventing that spread as much as they can.
Now, Danielle, I'm frustrated by the White House briefings because our wonderful press corps is, of course, America-centric, and they are not asking Drs. Birx and Fauci what the international data is showing about comorbidity and whether or not there's any part of the world that is more or less hit. What is your understanding? Are the comorbidities the same in say, Dakar as they are in D.C.?
It's hard to tell because, testing varies. We're not really sure what the true extent of the problem is. In sub-Saharan Africa, in Africa right now, we have 10,000 cases of coronavirus, some 500 deaths, and that's a population of more than 1 billion people. So, you do see some countries where the death rate is much higher than others, like Burkina Faso, which is particularly concerning because that is a conflict hotspot. You're dealing with this pandemic at the same time. You're dealing with conflict practically everywhere outside the capital city and a budget that is increasingly strained by both this public health crisis and that Islamist insurgency.
Now, Danielle Paquette, the Democratic Republic of the Congo has successfully contained an Ebola outbreak over the course of 2 years. And that was, I believe, the call was made last week that the containment was complete. That's pretty far away from Senegal. It's not West Africa per se, but obviously they've got pandemic training in the DRC. Do they have pandemic training in Senegal in the surrounding region of West Africa?
Oh, absolutely. That's one of our strengths in the region. West Africa, as you know, battled the world's most deadliest Ebola outbreak a few years ago. So they have all these contact tracing procedures in place. They knew right away to get ready because of how devastating that epidemic was from 2014 to 2016. Doctors are trained with dealing with highly infectious contagions. And, we saw in Senegal, in Dakar, as soon as word of the coronavirus broke, they started shifting researchers in the Capitol to developing a test that could pick up on this in 10 minutes for $1.
Oh, my goodness. Is it effective? Does it have a good accuracy rate?
They're testing it right now, but this effort is supported by the World Health Organization, and this is coming from a lab that developed one of the world's first yellow fever vaccines. So hopes are pretty high.
Tell us about the healthcare infrastructure of Senegal.
So Senegal is similar to other African nations in that, it's just underfunded. There's not as many resources as you will find in the West, but countries are doing the best they can, scrambling to build bigger isolation wards. But in Senegal and other countries, you have not that many ventilators. What I'm hearing is a couple hundred, but some countries have as few as 3. And when you read news about New York getting 75,000 ventilators, for example, in a shipment, it's crazy to me as someone covering West Africa, knowing that one hospital in a region with millions of people might have 1 ventilator.
It is. One assumes that America will become the medicine cabinet for the world and indeed the medical technology cabinet for the world. I believe that is the intention. Let me ask you a geopolitical question. The PRC is going everywhere with a public relations campaign to deter or divert people's attention from their lack of transparency and the dire consequences of it. Are they present in Senegal and the surrounding region doing just that?
Yes, and to mixed effect. You saw a group of doctors from China land in Nigeria this week, and uproar on social media. People were worried that they were bringing the contagion into the country. So this campaign to help others is sometimes whipping up some confusion on social media where it's already rampant. But in other cases, Jack Ma, the Chinese billionaire, he's donating hundreds of ventilators, hundreds of thousands of masks to African countries, and in some cases is acting as the only big philanthropist helping areas out. So that it just varies how this public relations campaign is sorting out.
Now, let me close by this. You gave a good word for the WHO. I have previously spent part of the program discussing with Representative Cheney, as did Secretary Pompeo yesterday, that the WHO was complicit in the non-transparency and indeed they put out on January 14th that there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission, which was simply false. Is the WHO on the ground effective in Senegal? Should we make a difference between Tedros and the people who are actually doing the work?
Every doctor I've talked to in West Africa thus far, in Senegal in particular, has praised the WHO for stepping in quickly, keeping the spotlight on these particularly vulnerable nations and supplying resources. It's a pandemic, and it's an issue that people knew so little about, and false statements have been flying practically in all corners of the world. And so what I'm hearing is they're responding with patience and gratitude. And in particular this week, a whole bunch of African presidents stepped up to the defense of Dr. Tedros, saying you can't be blasting the WHO right now. They're doing the best we can after Donald Trump and the White House considered, cutting funds, according to statements we saw this week.
Well, this is, and perhaps a debate for another time. I am in favor of withholding funds until Dr. Tedros is gone. He's a puppet of the PRC and the CCP. But the WHO is not Dr. Tedros. It is much bigger than that, and so it's a fine line to walk. Let me close by asking, as a relative matter, you talk with your other foreign correspondents, what part of the world do you anticipate will be most severely hit by this pandemic, Danielle Paquette?
You see awful fallout everywhere. And I, for one, keep hearing it's going to be the conflict zones. It's going to be the part of the world where militaries are split between enforcing lockdowns and curfews and fighting off extremists. And also, you see hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of people displaced, living together, sharing resources. Doctors are telling me that is going to fuel outbreaks that could last indefinitely, longer than all forecasts.
Wow.
So keeping an eye on areas where you're battling two fronts at once will be particularly important, I hear.
Danielle, please keep coming back, especially when you're back in Senegal. Follow her at DPAQ Report, and from the Washington Post. I appreciate it. Now, my friend John Andrazik, Five for Fighting, sent me a video last night of U.S. Army Voices singing his song, All for One. I have his permission to use any of his music. And so we're going to run the video for you of the U.S. Army Voices singing All for One because it is actually quite moving. Here it is.
Thank you again for joining us this afternoon. We'd like to close now with a song that the Army Voices have loved to sing for a long time. It's a song about unity, and of course that's more relevant now than ever. We hope you enjoy Five for Fighting's All for One.
Will always be one for all and all for one. We'll always be one for all and all for one. One for all and all.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined now by Jim Talent, former senator from Missouri and one of the genuine experts on pandemics. He and Senator Graham led an effort for over a decade to study this. He's run a number of tabletop exercises at the Johns Hopkins. Senator Talent, good morning. Welcome back. I hope you are well and your family.
Everybody is fine, we're doing well, sheltering in place.
All right, now tell me about how you view the pandemic in light of your understanding of how they spread. Do you think we flattened the curve?
I would be surprised if we have not. I think we've done a good job of flattening the curve. I'm looking forward to us being able to lift some of the more severe restrictions and relying on core, epidemiological techniques in order to control the spread of the disease in the future. I don't know exactly when, but I'm hoping it's sooner rather than later and thinking that it can be. So I know they're watching it very closely. We'll see. You and I talked 2 months ago about the possibility of therapeutics coming online, and hydroxychloroquine looks like a real candidate. I'm glad they've been talking about it. I'm glad they're trying it out, and the early evidence is coming back pretty hopeful.
And there are others as well. I am curious, Jim Talent, what you see as the exit strategy for the economy. You mentioned standard epidemiological techniques. What might those be?
Well, it's just like the personal hygienic responses, which do so much to interrupt the vector of the disease. Everybody agrees we need to continue doing that. Social distancing for the higher risk demographics, and I think people in those demographics get it. I think they need to be encouraged to continue those kind of distancing measures. Preventing the gathering of very large crowds in contexts where people are likely to spread it. Mardi Gras I understand what happened there, but it was not a great idea, and I think it explains a lot of what's happening in Louisiana. In other words, moving from a protocol where we're trying to socially distance everybody from everybody else to a protocol where everybody is following measures that interrupt the vectors of the disease, and we're distancing the higher risk demographics.
Now, I am frustrated, Senator Talent, by the lack of specificity in the briefings as to the comorbidities, by which I mean, I think I heard Dr. Burke say last night, there was no follow-up, that mortality is usually associated with 3 or more comorbidities. Now, they have mentioned diabetes, hypertension, obesity. I would like to know with some specificity, and my goodness, we've got a lot of data. We got 14,000 dead people. What is the actual killer comorbidity ranked by their mortality rates? Is this not common sense to make available to the public?
Well, I agree. I think there's always a challenge when you're trying to communicate about this, and particularly when you're somebody like Deborah Birx or Tony Fauci, and everybody's hanging on every word you say. The tension between wanting to be transparent and not wanting to say something that is at best just an educated guess at this point. But subject to, so I understand. It's like everything in the middle of a pandemic. Communication there's always upsides and downsides. Having said that, yes, I really tend to agree. They have to be collecting a lot of information. I'd also like to see somebody in the press, and don't get me going on the questions they've been asking, but somebody ask an intelligent, not a gotcha question, about whether this disease was seeded in the United States before the models have been assuming it was seeded, because I'm more and more coming to the conviction that it was here in force at least a month earlier before they are modeling it. And if it was, then that suggests we might be hitting the peak earlier than the model suggests. So those are the kind of questions I'd like to see asked.
I would also like to see asked, I believe it is the case that not one American has died for lack of a ventilator. I believe that is the case. I believe that our ICU capacity is adequate. I don't know that the media, which is pretty anti-Trump, is in a hurry to tell us and reassure us about hospital capacity. It doesn't say anything about the lethality of the virus. It just says our healthcare system has stood up pretty doggone fast.
Right. Now, it might tell us something about the virulence of the virus, though. If the virus was here earlier than we are now modeling it, and if the virulence rate is lower than we're estimating, and I would bet anything that if you pulled aside Fauci and Birx, and and said to them, look, if you had to guess, do you think this CFR rate is going to end up being lower than we're now modeling and assuming? I bet they'd say yes. Well, that suggests that we may already be at the peak. In other words, that it's been around longer. It's not as virulent as we think. It's bad enough, heaven knows. It's possible that we've reached the peak and we may be able to get out of this earlier. And that's kind of what I'm hopeful, particularly with these therapies that are available. You see how those things coming together could suggest that, well, you know what, we may be able to start reopening everything, and maybe people won't be so afraid that reopening it won't do any good.
Quick question, Jim Talent. $2.2 trillion is a heck of a lot of money, and more is on the way. I don't think the country's ever seen this kind of a rescue package. Might we be in for an inflationary effect? 30 seconds.
Well, they don't see anything like that yet, but yeah, it's a danger. I mean, I hope demand goes up so quickly that we have to worry about that. Let's put it
I hope you're right. Jim Talent on Twitter, America. If you're not following him, you're missing a lot. Stay tuned. Hour 3 ahead on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to my 400 affiliates across the globe. I am Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening. Joined now by Chuck Todd, host of Meet the Press. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. If it's 5 o'clock Monday through Friday, it's Meet the Press Daily. Good morning, Chuck. How's everyone in the Todd family?
Well, good morning, Hugh. And you can now add 1 o'clock as well these days on MSNBC.
Well,
at least through the pandemic. So
I didn't know that because I'm
started
now
this week. Yeah.
Oh gosh, it just worketh to death. I'm doing, by the way, an extra 1 hour a week, but not 5 hours a week. So Salem and NBC, it's like a galley ship.
Well, in fairness, it is 4 hours. I'm still taking my Monday weekend.
Okay. Look, I want to go back to my prediction a year and a half ago that Kamala Harris would be on the ticket because it's the only way I can redeem myself. I still think she's going to be on the ticket. Vice President Biden is the nominee. What do you rank the vice presidential selections as in the, back to your hotline days? How would you rank this?
Well, I start with the following premise, which is has to be immediately seen as ready on day one. So it has to be a statewide elected official in my head. And I do think has to run for president. I do think that the pandemic has changed that calculus. I think pre-pandemic, Stacey Abrams, Val Demings, I think both would have been much higher on the short list. I think now in this idea that you need executive experience of some sort, you want somebody on day one, and you may want somebody that's been vetted. I do think Kamala's on the super short list. I think Amy Klobuchar is on the super short list. I think, don't laugh at Warren, though I'm more skeptical of that, but I think she gets a look. I think Whitmer is semi-legit on that. I think Stacey Abrams, I'd move her down the list. I think who we all thought was the front runner 6 months ago. At the end of the day, what has she done? What has she run? She was state Senate minority leader in Georgia. It's the highest office she attained. I think when you're running to become the oldest first-term elected president in the middle of a pandemic, I think you're going to have to make sure there is a perception that's ready on day one.
And I personally believe that Senator Harris can do much better with having gone around the track unsuccessfully, and so I think she's at the top of my list.
I think a lot of people have learned, don't put somebody in there that hasn't been through the ringer, because then every little story, that they've ever had becomes a story where if you have Harris or Klobuchar, you're not going to get those gee whiz horrible stories at the start that Sarah Palin, Paul Ryan, Tim Kaine got.
Let me throw one outlier at you. Mary Barra, CEO of GM Michigan, obviously. Would it make sense for Joe Biden to go to corporate America?
I in theory, yes. In practice, no. I think that risks alienating the Bernie progressive wing, number one. Number two, I'm going to go back to what I said before. I think if you veer out in this day and age of media, whatever you want to call this, social media, all of it, right? I think having somebody that hasn't been through the barrel once or twice in their political lives, and any political life, she's had no political life, I think that's risky. I think that's much riskier than the downsides are much bigger than the upside.
All right, now, Chuck, the traditional approach is to keep people guessing until the last minute in order to have the 3 days the vice president has, the announcement day, the speech at the convention, and the debate. Well, we're in a different world. Is there an upside to advancing now so as to double your forces?
I certainly think when you say now, I say in a window of the next 60 days is now, for what it's worth, the definition of now, versus holding on until the middle of the summer. I think doing it around Memorial Day, doing a little sooner than usual, having a second person out there, especially when you've got a nominee that some people believe is charismatically challenged at times. You want, I think, the energy of a second person virtually running around the country. We don't know what the campaigning is going to look like. I think you want having, obviously you get a running mate, you assume it's a couple, so now you have two more people to send to fundraisers. And Biden's got a lot of catching up to on fundraising. So I think when you look at it financially, when you look at it in building coalitions, when you look at it in sort of preparing that second person, because I do think, again, because of this pandemic combined with Biden's age, I just think that it is going to matter to a lot of people. I think earlier makes more sense. and I suspect it as well.
And so Kamala Harris and Amy Klobuchar, let me ask you the hardest question. Minnesota is close to tipping. People don't understand that the Iron Range is very red now, and so there's a reason, the one state reason that Vice President typically get on there. But the African-American community, not only the key demographic, it's being disproportionately impacted by the virus. Can you really not put Kamala Harris on this ticket?
I think I will, I'm going to be not definitive on Kamala Harris, but I do think he's got to put a person of color, a woman of color on the ticket. And I do think that, the pre-pandemic, I had believed Stacey Abrams, Val Demings, and Kamala Harris were going to be the three of the five on the short list. I tell you, Val Demings has the biography of Val Demings is the one that should scare the bejesus out of everybody. Married to a cop, both were beat cops, met, mother of three children. I mean, just a very much, but I don't know in this, if you say to yourself, a member of Congress, highest attained office, but I do think it needs to be a person of color. In particular, I think this is what we're seeing with COVID-19 and its impact. I think it's going to galvanize the African-American political community in an even bigger way.
And I believe I think I've always said Kamala Harris is unique political talent. I think she learned hard lessons. Let me play for you, Chuck Todd. I speak Trump, you speak Trump. The president said something very unusual yesterday. When I want to hear your translation of it, here it is.
It's a weird deal going on there. I don't know what's happening. And I don't know why President Obama hasn't supported Joe Biden a long time ago. There's something he feels is wrong. Why isn't he'll come out? I'm sure he's got to come out at some point because he certainly doesn't want to see me for 4 more years. We're not. We think a little bit differently. You know what? I'll tell you. It does amaze me that President Obama hasn't supported Sleepy Joe. It just hasn't happened. When's it going to happen? When is it going to happen? Why isn't it? He knows something that you don't know. That I think I know, but you don't know.
All right, Chuck Todd, that's what is known as an unknown known. Not a known unknown, but an unknown known. I think I know what he means. What do you think he means?
I think he's just trying to smoke Obama out now. I think he wants to defuse that bomb as soon as possible. I think he also knows, I think that Obama waiting until the traditional start of the general election to see him, to start campaigning, I think that's one thing. And so I think that's a little bit of that. I think, if I were the president, you'd want to get the news of Obama out earlier. The other thing is, I do think it's an acknowledgement by the president, and I think this is what October is going to be about. It's going to be basically, do you want Team Obama or Team Trump managing the post-pandemic recovery?
That's exactly right.
The bottom line. And
that's exactly right.
And you know what? And look, Hugh, this is going to be an interesting thing because you're going to have the Trump folks saying, "Hey, we're here in midstream." You're going to have the Obama-Biden folks saying, "Hey, the first time we came in, we inherited a financial crisis." So it's going to be that is going to be the narrative fight in October.
Chuck, I can't agree with you enough. It's going to be Ron Klain and the competent side of Team Obama. There was some incompetence versus Mike Pompeo, Vice President Pence, Robert O'Brien, to a lesser extent Peter Navarro.
You're picking out the competent ones.
Yes, I am, because that's what we're going to see. Both sides hold up their strongest suit, right? That's well said. I'm going to watch it.
He's going to say, "I love them both."
I am going to now watch at 1:00. Didn't know you were doing that. How are you doing that?
Brother.
Are you doing that from home?
Where else? It's called mission creep.
Oh, gosh, your poor kids. Your poor kids.
Well, that's what I tell you. It's shutting down flipping the studio switch on a fourth or third hour of the day.
Yeah, and it's saying, "Shut up upstairs." I know, I know the drill. Chuck Todd, always a pleasure. Follow him on Twitter at Chuck Todd. Meet the Press daily at 1 and at 5, and of course, if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. Let me check the markets for you while I can. Brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. AndrewandTodd.com. They are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They lend you money. 888-888-1172. A lot of you need money. You need to refinance your house and get cash equity out. Some of you have money. About 3/4 of you are actually better off than you were, I believe, if you had bond funds. In that bond fund, you may want to buy property. That's AndrewandTodd.com. They're making loans. They'll find you a realtor. I always mention Gordon Wood in Alexandria for you Seattle people who are getting moved to HQ2. Gordon Wood in Alexandria works with AndrewandTodd.com, but they got realtors all over the country. Call them, 888-888-1172. Overnight, Japan barely unchanged. Right now, England and Germany are having rallies. That is good. Crude oil is up to $26. Gold is at $17.04. I don't know what America is going to do after a 779-point gain yesterday, 206 on the NASDAQ. But I do know that AndrewandTodd.com are where you go to get started. Get in line and get ready to lock at AndrewandTodd.com. Come right back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Job Creators Network.
Welcome back, America. I am Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening. We will post Chuck Todd at my YouTube channel, YouTube, and then just enter Hugh Hewitt. You should subscribe. That way you'll get the most important interviews. You can also watch the whole show live at HughHewitt.com. You should be following me at Twitter because I push out the most important news. My phone number right now, because I'd like to hear what you think about what the president said yesterday, 1-800-520-1234. Dwayne, I want to play that again. This is President Trump speaking yesterday at the Corona Task Force briefing, got asked a question about Joe Biden, answered this way, and Bernie Sanders.
It's a weird deal going on there. I don't know what's happening. And I don't know why President Obama hasn't supported Joe Biden a long time ago. There's something he feels is wrong. Why isn't he'll come out? I'm sure he's got to come out at some point, because he certainly doesn't want to see me for 4 more years. We're not. We think a little bit differently. You know what? I'll tell you. It does amaze me that President Obama hasn't supported Sleepy Joe. It just hasn't happened. When's it going to happen? When is it going to happen? Why isn't it? He knows something that you don't know. That I think I know, but you don't know.
I think I know. What does he mean? 1-800-520-1234. Chuck Todd thinks he's trying to smoke out President Obama's endorsement early. I think he's intimating that Joe Biden will not be the nominee. I think that's what he's intimating. What do you think? 1-800-520-1234. Joe Biden went on NBC yesterday, said this about the Army Corps of Engineers building hospitals, cut number 7.
Well, that's a kind of a presumptuous thing to say for me to answer. We went through in our administration the H1N1 virus. We also dealt with the whole pandemic that was in Africa, kept it under control by, doing what I urged the president to do months ago, and he's doing now, get the United States military in, building hospitals, et cetera, and 10 hospitals and the like. But I also managed the $800 billion Recovery Act, which I know from experience you have to do it every single solitary day. I've learned that it's important to have an inspector general that you speak with every week. You make sure everything's transparent, because the only thing worse than not getting something done is telling someone something is getting done when it's not getting done. They lose confidence. So there's some of the things that I have experience doing, and I think I'd be well positioned to be able to do. And I know how the federal government functions. I know how government functions and know how to get things done within the government.
All right. If you think that's confidence building, good for you. Lucy in Columbus, Ohio, what do you think the president was saying about Biden?
Hi, Hugh. Love your show. Love everything you say. I
Thank you,
just want
Lucy.
to tell you that I think that Obama is very political, and he needs to keep himself at a distance. And so I'm sure, in my opinion, he's trying to be very strategic in what he says and what his next move. Because like Bill Clinton, he probably wants his wife to run for president someday.
Oh, you know what, Lucy? I disagree with you. She will never do it. Never. She is not going to do it. She is not Hillary Clinton.
Good.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to underscore that. Let me go to Steve in Florida. Steve, what do you think the president was saying?
We are 2 sneezes away from Nancy Pelosi being president. Joe Biden is feeble. They keep propping him up. He won't be the nominee.
No, I think that's what he was saying, is that he won't be the nominee. Kirk in New York, what do you think the president was saying?
Yeah, I think he was just saying that he won't be the nominee, but because there's some sort of diagnosed cognitive problem that we're seeing signs of, but that we don't know about.
There was this weird moment yesterday in an online town hall, cut number 11, Joe Biden.
We have to make sure everyone has access to maintain affordable health insurance coverage. We should be making it easier, not harder, to make sure make sense to, I'll put it another way. It makes no sense. It makes no sense.
Okay, put it another way. Here he is in an online town hall with Nevada State Senator Ivana Cancela, forgetting her name, cut number 8.
Hospitality workers, I need not tell you about that, Senator. In Las Vegas?
Senator in Las Vegas. Joe Biden, known, unknown, unknown, known. I'm coming back with Senator Rick Scott. Stay tuned, America.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Job Creators Network.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Two pieces of breaking news, and they're big news. 6.6 million jobless claims filed last week, the same as the week before. 10% of America has gone out of work in 2 weeks. Also, however, the good news, the Federal Reserve just announced a massive Main Street loan program. They're going to be directly lending to the states and to small businesses. That is huge as well. To discuss both developments, I'm joined by Senator Rick Scott of Florida. Good morning, Senator. Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Good morning. Don't you feel sorry for the people that, don't have a job right now? I grew up in a family like that, and it's horrible. People are going to lose their cars and their houses and stuff. We got to keep this economy going as much as we can and get it reopened.
Let me get your reaction to the Federal Reserve announcing they will buy $600 billion worth of loans through the Main Street lending program and up to $500 billion in lending to states and municipalities through a municipal liquidity facility.
Well, I think it's great that the Federal Reserve is part of this. And, on the other side of me, I have a concern. Their balance sheet has just ballooned in the last 16 years. Before this was $4.2 trillion. So I'm worried about that. But at this time, I think they've got to show up and they've got to be a part of this and making sure that we get this economy, keep it going as much as we can and get it reopened as quickly as we can.
Now, Senator Scott, yesterday we received word from the Nixon Foundation's bankers, Pacific Mercantile Bank, our longtime bank, that I don't have to lay anybody off from the foundation. We got 36 employees because I just got the small business loan that the CARES Act provided for that is a 2-month lifeline to small business. That needs to be replenished for other small businesses that weren't as quick as we are, have as long-standing a relationship with the bank. Manu Raju of CNN just reported that we should, quote, expect a Senate stalemate after McConnell announced the chamber would try to pass more funding for small business loans. Dems will object, try and pass an alternative, which includes cash for hospitals, state and local governments, food stamps. GOP will object. I am astonished that the Democrats will not fund the only lifeline to employment that people have. I'm just astonished that they would object.
But this is what they do. This is Pelosi, Schumer, the Democrats. They're not worried about the people who lost their job. They're not worried about these small businesses that are struggling. We know we need to put money in, and we got to do it the right way. We got to make sure the money doesn't get lent to people that don't need it. But we got to do it, and so it's always something else they want to do that is not even related to this. What they're talking about is not even related to the coronavirus. And so why are they doing this? Remember in the last one, Schumer and Pelosi put in, $25 million for the Kennedy Center, $150 million for the National Endowment for the Arts. It might be nice to have. We have a crisis. Let's deal with the crisis.
Now, my question is, this is working. The small business loan program is working. I know that firsthand. It's working. It means I don't have to lay anybody off. Why would something that is working be controversial?
It's not. It's just they don't. But the Democrats and Pelosi and Schumer, they don't care about that. They're going to take every crisis. They're going to follow what Rahm Emanuel says. Don't let a crisis go to waste. Let's see what we can do to change the world. Let's get all of our liberal stuff in here. Let's work at it every day. Don't worry about the big problem here. Spread the coronavirus, people losing their jobs, the small businesses. Let's get our liberal stuff in here. And that's what Pelosi and Schumer, the Democrats, do. They don't care. They're just taking advantage of us.
So let's assume that they will I believe the blowback will be enormous. They're going to cost millions of Americans their jobs if they do not replenish this fund. And no one else cares about their wish list. Let's say we get that. That will be phase 4 when they do recede their objection. I just do not believe it's sort of like Schumer has made some step on the rake moments before, but objecting to the relief of small businesses would be like stepping on a rake 5 times. Eventually you'll get the message. When we move to phase 5, Senator, I want some defense spending to answer China. This is incredible. We spent $2.2 trillion without our China-facing defense systems. What say you?
I agree with you, Hugh. We've got to understand China is not a competitor. China is an adversary. You look at how they handled this. They were not transparent intentionally, in my opinion. You look at what they did and what the WHO has done. They were not transparent. Americans, Italians, Spaniards, Brits have died because of that. And so they're going to do everything they can to take advantage of this crisis and hurt America and build themselves up. We've got to understand they're building a military bigger than ours, and at some point they're going to feel comfortable confronting us. And what it's not confronting America. It's confronting free trade. It's confronting democracy. So it's confronting our way of life. And that's who China is. They're a totalitarian government. It's communist China run by the Communist Party. Don't ever forget that. When you think about buying a product from China, just remember what they just did to us. They lied to us. They intentionally lied to us about this crisis. And so when you buy a product, you say it's okay to steal our jobs. It's okay to kill Americans. It's okay that they steal our technology. It's okay to build a military to beat us. And that's what they're doing.
So, Senator Scott, I hope when it comes time, we forward fund, I asked General Deptula, all of the F-35s for 2 years, which is an additional 48 for the Air Force and the similar number for the Navy and the Marine Corps. We put another Virginia-class submarine in the water, and we forward fund all of the strategic programs. I'm not sure that's your committee, but I sure hope you're out there banging the drum. Let me talk to you about...
I'm on armed services, and if we have to think about it, we have got to rebuild our Navy. We have got to remember, if it's not for our Navy, there will not be free trade in the world.
That is a concise summary. I just wish that the entire Senate would realize it takes a while. You've got to put the money into the hands of these contractors, not on a year-by-year basis, but on a forward funding. You drop all the money into General Dynamics or whoever's building the Columbia class, and you say, go forth and build a dozen. Senator, let me talk to you about Joe Biden is the nominee. He is going to select the vice president. Chuck Todd and I just discussed it. I believe it's going to be Kamala Harris. What's your assessment of Senator Harris?
I've been in the Senate 16 months. She's a nice person to be around. Her politics are just the opposite of mine. But, it doesn't really matter. They're all become socialists. What Bernie has done is he's shown what the party is. So whether the nominee was Biden, whoever his running mate is, they're socialists. They want big government. They want government to run our entire lives. They want Medicare for all. They want the Green New Deal. They are going to ruin the country that our founders built because they want to control our whole lives, tell us everything, what we do every day. That's what they've become.
So the Republicans are the party of freedom and the Democrats are the party of socialism. Is that the choice in November?
Yeah. Do you want government to run your life, or do you want to have the opportunity, with no guarantee, the opportunity to do whatever you want? I grew up in public housing. I don't even know my dad. I eventually had an adopted dad. But my mom told me, thank God for the United States and a country where you can live under freedom. You can do whatever you want and be whatever you want.
So in terms of how this will shape up, the virus will, of course, impact politics, both practically and in framing the election. I assume a recovery will be underway. If it's not, the world is really screwed. Do you assume a recovery will be underway by the fall?
Oh, yeah. I mean, what we don't know is how fast it's going to happen. If we don't keep these small businesses in business, it's not going to happen very fast. They're most of the jobs in this country. If we don't keep people employed to the extent we can, it's not going to happen. So that's why I'm frustrated with the Democrats, what they're doing here. But I believe the economy will be coming back. I believe Trump will have a win because it's a choice. None of us want government to dictate everything to us. I want freedom. I want liberty. I want to lead my own life, take my own chances, take my own risk.
Do you believe that is deeply inured in a younger generation that may not know what happened in Eastern Europe, that may not understand that Venezuela is the end point of socialism?
I think we have to constantly, liberty is fleeting. We have to fight all the time. We have to explain it all the time. When you sit down with somebody and you start asking them, well, do you want the government to choose this? Do you want the government to choose that? Of course not. I want to make my own choices. And so it's been sold as this nice thing, we're all going to work together. But what it means is, no, government is going to tell you everything. We're going to tell you what type of job you're going to have. We're going to tell you where you're going to live. We're going to tell you where you get your health care. We're going to tell you all these things. And by the way, the money's not going to be yours. It's going to be the government's, because they're going to have to raise taxes so much that there will be no big opportunity in this country. The opportunities will be overseas somewhere.
Senator, yesterday I had a very interesting conversation with Austin Goolsbee, good guy, former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors under President Obama, not rotten, just wrong. And I am urging that Americans be allowed to access their retirement funds for a flat tax of 10% because some people just need to go get it. His response is that would benefit the wealthy too much. In other words, it's not their money. I just was astonished. But that was genuine. Austin believes that if you allow people to access their retirement funds at a flat tax of 10%, it will benefit people who have saved more than people who haven't saved. I'm thinking in terms of the effect on the economy of stimulus. What do you make of that kind of a response?
Doesn't make you mad. If you go work hard, you go save your money. It's your money. It's not government's money. It's your money. But that's how the Democrats think. They think that it's their money, and they're just letting you keep a little bit of it. I mean, it's our money. We busted our butt for it. And by the way, you can do it a bunch of different ways. You can do a flat tax. You can say you can borrow it and you have to put it back in 3 years. Do something, but let people have access to their money.
Now, the Senate did waive the penalty for early withdrawal. That's good. That's a first step. They waived the mandatory distribution. That's good. That's a first step. But there are $12 to $14 trillion in tax-advantaged accounts that we've got to put into circulation for those who need to access it. It's the restaurant owner who has to close unless he can get the money out of his retirement, but he can't give up his entire retirement to confiscatory taxes.
Well, shoot, we're helping the restaurant with their employees, but when they have to go buy the food to reopen, right? Where are they going to get it? I mean, we've got to figure out how to let people have access to whatever resource they have to get reopened, to rebuild this economy. Because you know what helps? It helps like my mom growing up that had 3 jobs. She wanted to work. Do you think about her life would be like right now? If she had lost her job in the middle of this with 5 kids, she would have had an unbelievably big problem.
Do you expect, last question, Senator Scott, the media to correctly message today that the Democrats are blocking relief for small businesses? That's what they are doing.
Of course not. No, of course not. It's so disappointing. I mean, it's so disappointing that they don't explain it what it is. The media should just say, "Hey, these are the facts." Now, if you want to be a pundit, say, "I have a pundit show," but don't tell me you have a news show and then you're just a pundit for one side. That's wrong.
I agree. I am a Republican. People know that, but I am reporting a fact. Democrats are going to block relief for small businesses today, and you will lose your job because of that. Senator Rick Scott, thank you. Always a pleasure. Time for me to tell our audience about relieffactor.com, and I'm reaching way over. honorboundcoffee.com. Now listen, honorboundcoffee.com is what you get if you want every sip of every cup of coffee to actually be supporting military families across the United States. Because 100% of the profits from honorboundcoffee.com go to military families via a select group of organizations dedicated to that, including the Injured Marine Semper Fi Fund and including the YMCA on all the military bases. Honorboundcoffee.com. Go and subscribe. Get your coffee delivered at home. Great coffee, and every cup you drink will support those folks. Also, here's relieffactor.com. Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. I don't think it's raining in D.C. this morning. I have to go and check, but if it is not, I will be out running. I don't like to run in the rain. Heck with that. I can put my feet up and watch Fauda and Labiro if I have to, or read the Rubicon by Tom Holland. But if I'm out walking or running, it's because of relieffactor.com. The 4 necessary supplements that support the temporary relief of minor aches and pains keep you moving. Whether it's 1 mile, 4, 8, 12, whatever you're doing today, do it with relieffactor.com. Order your first package, your starter trial pack for 3 weeks for $19.95 at relieffactor.com. And then come right back. Lanhee Chen joins me as we talk about the WHO to conclude today's Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Job Creators Network.
Welcome back, America. Lanhee Chen is a fellow at the Hoover Institution and director of domestic policy studies in the public policy program at Stanford University. He is also the author of a brand new Wall Street Journal op-ed titled Lost in Beijing, the story of the World Health Organization, subtitled China Broke the WHO. The U.S. has to fix it or leave it and start its own group. Lanhee is also a friend of mine. Good morning, Lanhee. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Hugh. Thank you.
Let's get to the bottom line. You do not believe the WHO can be repaired, do you?
No, I don't. I think it's been completely compromised. I think what's happened over the years is that China has exerted a significant amount of influence. And I think, Hugh, we're seeing it in terms of how they have responded to the current coronavirus crisis. They have essentially accepted Beijing's lies. They have accepted everything that China has said about the coronavirus to be true instead of investigating it and giving us the real story. They've put politics, Hugh, over public health.
Now, Lanhee, earlier in the program, Danielle Paquette, who is the Washington Post's West Africa bureau chief, told me that the WHO is doing vital work in Senegal and other places. So there's a difference between the bureaucratic puppets who are run out of Beijing at the top, Tedros and others, and the on-the-ground doctors. How do we make that, can we distinguish between those two levels of the organization effectively, or do we have to start over?
Well, I think here's the challenge. First of all, the WHO is kind of a bureaucratic mess. So you've got a bunch of regional directors who are trying to do good work in various parts of the world. And then you've got this sort of central hierarchy, which unfortunately has been co-opted by Beijing. I really do think if we're going to get in there and reform it, we've really got to blow the thing up and start over. We've got to think about how the organization is led, how best to get the aid to where it needs to go. There's no question the WHO has served some valuable functions over the years. They are doing some good work. But if you've got an organization that fundamentally is corrupt and fundamentally is mismanaged and misrun, you've got to ask yourself to what extent you can salvage it and to what extent you've really got to go in there and say, look, we've got to find some way of starting over. And I tend to think at this point, starting over might be the best way to do this, simply because of just how deep and how significant the rot in the organization is.
People understand corruption when they talk about FIFA, for example. Are you suggesting, is there evidence that Tedros and others have received direct payments from the PRC?
No, there's no evidence of that. What we do know is that Tedros was backed strongly by the PRC when he ran for the director generalship of the WHO. We also know that there are people around him in very senior positions who have taken the position of the PRC on a number of different issues. A perfect example of this is the way in which the WHO has internalized the PRC's view of Taiwan. And I think there are a series of different interactions over the years, including one very recently with the guy who runs the WHO's coronavirus task force that demonstrates this.
Now, there also is an infamous January 14th announcement from the WHO that there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission of the virus. Probably the most disastrous single moment in the history of public health. And the WHO has not yet come to grips with why they put that out there. Is that not the starting point, the first question? Why did you put that out there?
Right. I think that's a big question. On January 14th, they declared that there was no human-to-human transmission. Now, this was not because, Hugh, they independently investigated that and found it. They were simply accepting the view of the Chinese government that there was no human-to-human transmission. They put it out there. They made decisions based on it. And for an organization that is premised on the best public health answers, supposedly, for them to do that was either highly irresponsible or fundamentally problematic, because we now know that simply wasn't the case.
No, do we not ever? The whole world is staggered by the fact that not only is it transmissible, it's highly contagious. So they were not merely silent, they were abjectly, objectively wrong. I don't know how you ever repair the credibility unless you start over.
Well, it's even worse than that, Hugh, because it's not just that one incident, right? They then go on and say, for example, that travel restrictions to China don't work. We know now that the president's travel restrictions did buy us time and were valuable. They also said, Tedros specifically said, the spread of the disease, coronavirus, was slow and minimal. We know that to be untrue now as well. So in situation after situation, the WHO was wrong on public health, And the only explanation one can provide is it's because they wanted to placate Beijing. That's the only reasonable explanation that's left.
So the Secretary of State said from the podium, now is not the time for recrimination yesterday. But do you believe, 30 seconds, Lanhee, now is the time to build the alternative to the WHO? You don't have to smash them up with a hammer. Let's just stop giving them money and give it to people like Doctors Without Borders that work.
Well, let's take a serious look at what the alternative is. Let's take a serious look at building an organization where you've got countries who are willing to abide by norms of transparency and best practices, and let's see if we can put something together. And if the answer is no, there are a lot of great nonprofits. You mentioned Doctors Without Borders. There's a lot of other groups that are out there doing very good work. That's what we should be supporting fundamentally, not an organization that's in the pocket of the PRC.
Stanford's Lanhee Chen, thank you for joining me. I have tweeted out his Wall Street Journal article on the WHO. It should be mandatory reading. The unemployment claims are high. The Fed's intervention is higher. That is great that the world is responding quickly. I believe in the V. I hope you do too. We'll be back tomorrow. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo. Thank all of you for listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show. All of the best interviews available at my YouTube channel. Go and watch them.